Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call up House Bill 500 with Senate amendments.
The chair lays out House Bill 500 with Senate amendments and recognizes Dr. Bonnen to explain the Senate amendments.
Mr.
Thank
Speaker.
you, Mr.
Ms. Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
No, thanks. I'd like to at least be able to say a few words before taking questions.
wait.
Not at this time.
If you don't mind. So members, House Bill 500 is the Supplemental Appropriations Act. And what this does is this closes out the current biennium. So we talk a lot about the budget, and the budget is forward-looking. That will be the budget for fiscal years 26 and 27. This is closing out the current biennium, fiscal years 24 and 25. We're going to end this fiscal year well under all of our required spending limits. We'll be $5.5 billion under the constitutional tax spending limit, $10 billion under the pay-as-you-go limit, and $9.6 billion under the population inflation limit, also known as the consolidated general revenue limit. The budget for the current biennium will end with approximately $41 billion in property tax relief, and it has a lot of significant investments through the supplemental in infrastructure and in the future of our state. There are also some numbers that we're able to tie up or complete, because at the beginning of the biennium, everything is a projection. We have updated numbers that allow us then to close out based on what has actually been experienced, the accurate numbers. So for example, there's $1.1 billion in the Foundation School Program based on updated student population information. We also provide another $243 million for instructional materials. Water infrastructure has been a big discussion this session, and there's other legislation that will dedicate future revenues to water infrastructure in our state, but in this supplemental we have $2.5 billion for the Water Development Board to implement provisions of Senate Bill 7 and fund water infrastructure projects. Additionally, there is $1.3 billion to the Department of Criminal Justice, including a little over $500 million for operational costs and $410 million to increase capacity at our correctional facilities. There's $1 billion in ERS legacy payments that is putting us on a path to end our actuarial liability in the state pension. We also provided significant funding for the Texas Division of Emergency Management and Texas Forest Service, making sure that our responders have the resources and equipment they need to protect our communities. And of course, the wildfires were the worst that we have experienced in the history of the state, so we're going to be better prepared for that. There's $369 million for the teacher retirement system to provide active care insurance premium support so that our teachers don't see as much of an increase in their premiums. We have funding of approximately $150 million, which should complete funding for the renovations at the Alamo. There's $100 million for the Railroad Commission in their strategy to plug orphan wells. There's funding for DFPS with respect to foster care and the rollout of our community-based care strategy. And then we also do provide significant funding for the military department to take on the challenge of deferred maintenance, which is a significant backlog that we have at our state armories. I'm not going to go over every single item, obviously, that's in the supplemental, but that's a good overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes.
Gentleman yields for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Bonnen. I intend to vote for this bill, but I have to say that I like the House version that went out better than what the Senate has done to it. I wanted to ask you about some of the Senate changes. I know this bill has important funding that you just laid out for fire prevention, water infrastructure, for our teachers, for our state employees, and I do appreciate this work. There is a change where the Senate cut out almost $1 billion in reimbursement for the school district, for the SHARS money that the school districts are losing. Is that correct?
So the reality is that it's a little difficult to look at the supplemental without also looking at the future budget, because they're an integrated strategy. And as you know, there are $8.5 billion of new funding in House Bill 2, and that does appear in Senate Bill 1, which we will be taking up soon. So I think of that as one element of a bigger picture of what we're doing in the Foundation School Program. And it's true that that one bucket, which would have been for SHARS, has been removed. But the issue with SHARS is that was entirely a federal program. And we had spent many years, frankly, defending the state in court because we were being challenged on the methodology that we were using, and we had exhausted every appeal. There was not $1 of state revenue involved in that, but when the federal government redid that program, then there was a loss for the districts, and the question was whether the state was going to provide state general revenue to replace the loss of federal dollars. And then there was an additional complication around how would you implement that in a way that accurately reflected the way they would have received it. Because if you put it in a different methodology or strategy, then those dollars will not land the way they would have landed. And so the decision was to take that money and invest it in the future through HB2 and the total $8.5 billion of increased funding that we've adopted for the next biennium.
And I appreciate that sometimes you have to look at both bills to understand the full picture. But there are school districts that money is very specific in how it can be used. And right. I do know there are school districts who are facing, my own school district, it'll be about a $5 million hit to lose the SHARS money, but there are some school districts that are smaller and are trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet with the loss of that money. What I have heard from the school districts is that they spent that Medicaid money according to guidance from HHSC. And so I had appreciated that the House put that money in so that our school districts wouldn't have to bear the burden of those interpretations that came from this state. And I'm disappointed to see that the Senate took that money out. But I wanted to ask you about another issue. This body made clear in legislation that the money spent on vouchers would be capped at $1 billion. And it is my understanding that this bill has 28 employees that are going to work on the ESA program that are paid for with this money that is in addition to the $1 billion that is in the main budget.
The $1 billion, so the program is limited, as I understand it, and this is statutory and a different piece of legislation, to $1 billion for the biennium. This is closing out this biennium, and the costs that you're referring to are administrative. So these are not dollars that are going to go into funding of the program or the ESAs, but in administrative costs at the comptroller's office, and they are in the current biennium, not in the next biennium.
We were led to believe, definitely as the Public Education Committee, but I think as House members, that the administrative costs would come out of the $1 billion that were authorized for the next biennium. You are right that we didn't foreclose money being spent this biennium. I think it didn't occur to us to foreclose this biennium's money for the spending on the voucher program, but I was disappointed to see that there was a loophole that the Senate was able to get through to add more money to the voucher program. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. I move adoption.
Dr. Bonnen moves that the House concur with Senate amendments to HB 500. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Show Mr. King voting aye. Show Ms. Isaac voting aye. Whoa, whoa!
They keep breaking those. Maybe they need some new glue. They need some new glue.
Mr. Speaker.
Did you lose the whole guy? Or did it pop off? He's coming.
There being 112 ayes and 24 nays, The House concurs in Senate amendments subject to Article 3, Section 49A of the Texas Constitution.